Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. I'm Yudhita Kamaja, country representative of Euroxas Japan, and a very special warm welcome to you all. It's a great day in Japan for many reasons, and I would like to also welcome our special guest today, Gijs Berends, First Consular Head of Science, Innovation, Digital, and other EU Policy section at the delegation of the European Union to Japan. This is the special Meet Your Science coffee webinar. And our interview today is especially relevant because there have been some exciting news in the past few hours with reference to Japan's accession to Horizon Europe. Gijs, welcome to our webinar.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. It's nice to be speaking to you. Thanks for inviting me to this webinar. It's a pleasure to be talking to you.
Thank you so much. So let's jump right into the thick of things. And the first question would be, first and foremost, how did your professional development lead you to become a science diplomat? So what was your educational and career path that brought you to your current position? If you can say a few words about that.
Okay, so well, after university, my first position was actually at a Dutch government institute, which was called the Scientific Council for Government Policy. Now, what this organization did was to give scientifically sound, evidence-based policy advice to the Dutch government. So that was essentially my first entry into the world of scientific advice, even though this was much more based on social policy than on hardcore science. And after that first position, I joined the European Commission. And as some of you may know, if you have a career at the European Commission, you cover normally a wide variety of policy areas. So I was working on trade policy, on food safety policy, on agriculture, on science, climate science and energy. So basically, you get exposed to a large number of policy sectors. Now, one of my responsibilities was actually here in Japan because I was based for the first time to the EU delegation in Tokyo from 2007 to 2012. So that was my first entry into the world of EU-Japan relations. And unfortunately, at the time, we were all faced with the Great East Japan earthquake. So this was a disaster that was a genuine challenge for Japan and its citizens. At the time, one of my responsibilities was to follow the radioactive contamination of the food chain. Because as you can imagine that back home in Europe, there were many citizens who were very concerned about that. And after following that issue for quite some time, I published together with a colleague a paper on that, which is really a paper that goes to the intersection of science and policy. So you can see I had a sort of affinity with that area of that place, if you wish. And therefore, I applied for the post of head of science and innovation at the EU delegation. And here I am, and that is my background to becoming science counselor.
Thank you so much. Indeed, I have looked into that publication, and yeah, it is valuable scientific work, and I highly recommend it for reading to anyone who can put their hands on it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you've already said a few words about what being a science diplomat means and what's actually involved, but would you mind elaborating on that a bit?
Sure. Well, maybe let me start with a sort of a technical answer to the question, what does a science diplomat do? I mean, the first thing is that we try to gather a lot of information. Some people would say this is sort of intelligence gathering, but ultimately the aim is really to understand the policy development within the government of Japan, also within the research community of Japan, if you wish. And this is helpful because we can learn from that, because we often back home in the European Commission headquarters, we are considering the same kind of challenges. So we can learn from each other. But an additional advantage is that you can also advise your colleagues back home on what is a good way to approach EU-Japan relations and maybe what is a less beneficial approach of to EU-Japan relations. And this is particularly important when you have ongoing negotiations. Now, you alluded already a little bit to the negotiations on Japan's association to Horizon Europe. So it's true that the last 15 months or so, we've been engaged in negotiations for an international agreement. And that requires, of course, that you do not make too many mistakes. And for the negotiators to feel reassured, it's helpful that they have someone here who can follow things up close. So I think that is really something that is just helpful. It's also about awareness raising, that we explain to our Japanese interlocutors what we are considering at the EU level. What does it mean when we adopt a new piece of legislation or a new policy document? So I would be with my colleagues well placed to do that because I'm already based here. Now, this is sort of a technical explanation. I mean, there are many other things. We organize seminars. We have visitors from the European Commission coming here. So we have to make sure that they meet with meaningful interlocutors. But what I really would like to add here is that if you look at the last few years, that the role of science or science policy in the world of diplomacy has changed dramatically, I would say. And this is not so strange because there's a number of trends that you can identify that have the effect that the science diplomat does slightly different work than maybe before. And the first development or the first trend is that you have this sort of, what would you say, the major powers in the world are essentially competing for technological supremacy. And whatever you may think of that, it has an impact on the role of science and innovation. The second thing is that in the last few years, there has been an enormous debate about economic security, about strategic autonomy. And once again, there was a lot of attention on the role of science innovation, how that can contribute to finding a good policy outcome in that debate. And then thirdly, and this applies particularly to Europe, where there have been a number of reports that came out, is that science and innovation are instrumental in improving the competitiveness of the European Union, and that somehow we might have to do an extra effort to really generate economic growth through science and innovation. And then maybe lastly, because I think it's important to point this out, is that there are, of course, concerns that we're moving to some kind of post-truth world where there's a lot of disinformation going, and the voice of the scientific world is not always well understood or believed. And this ultimately, what it means if you add all these trends together is that the role of a science diplomat is much more political than it used to be. So that's how I would formulate it.
Thank you so much. Before asking a little bit more about the association and what it entails, would you mind saying a few words about what your favorite memory is about being a science diplomat?
Well, memory is a strong word because I've been in this position 2 years, so it's not that I can go back in time for a very long period of time. But I think one of my favorite events, if you wish, is the EU-Japan Science Policy Forum in Kyoto. So I think maybe some of the listeners who will listen to this webinar are familiar with the Science and Technology in Society Forum in Kyoto, which is an annual event, often tabled as the Davos of the science world, if you wish. And this is indeed a very essential gathering of policymakers and people from the research community. But usually, per tradition, the day before, we organize this EU-Japan Science Policy Forum, where in a rather informal setting, we bring together government officials from both sides, university presidents, presidents of funding agencies, influential thinkers. And for like half a day, we can sort of brainstorm about topics that are of our mutual interest. So for instance, this year we were talking about research security, which is an important policy topic at the moment. Or how do you really, if you have good science results, how do you translate that into innovations or new businesses? Something that Japan and the EU together can actually improve quite a lot upon. So I like that setting because it's rich in substance, but there's a sort of informality about it, which makes it a rather popular event. And then, of course, as you have mentioned, what I should certainly not forget to mention is that indeed, at the end of this year, we came out with a press release to announce that the negotiations between the EU and Japan on an international agreement for Japan's association to Horizon Europe have been successfully concluded. Now, I would say we all think this is going to be a bit of a game changer, because if you boil it down to the essence, what it does is that it allows Japan-based researchers or research entities to join European research entities in a sort of a group of researchers, which we call a consortium. And if they successfully apply for funding, that all of them, including the researchers who are based in Japan, will be automatically funded by Horizon Europe, which is the EU's funding program. And why is that? It's because through this international agreement, Japan has agreed to put a certain amount so its own contribution to Horizon Europe into our program, and that allows Japan-based research to take advantage of that. So it will be much easier for European and Japanese researchers to team up, to collaborate, and then hopefully together find solutions to many of the pressing problems that we face today.
Thank you so much for the very extensive answer. And let me just say, I've had the pleasure of participating in both the EU-Japan Science Forum and the SCS Forum in the days following that. And indeed, the informal setting of the EU-Japan Forum that has a science policy forum, which is organized every year by you and your colleagues, is one of the highlights of the year. And the STS Forum that gathers experts from all around the world is always a great opportunity for networking and for promoting science that takes place in Europe and also in Japan. Thank you. I'm actually looking at the questions that I was about to pose to you, and several of them I think have been answered. So let me just ask, what kind of interlocutors, what types of organizations do you meet and work with on a regular basis here in Japan? So could you just mention a few, maybe your colleagues that you may meet the most often during the year, the most you interact with, besides, of course, the science counselors at the various European embassies?
Okay, well, I think first and foremost, we reach out to our colleagues in the ministries of the government of Japan. I think these are our most likely interlocutors, particularly at times of ongoing negotiations. But we go well beyond that, I would say. We visit many universities, actually, at all levels. So my ambassador often goes, I often go, my colleagues go. And we try to not just to focus on universities in Tokyo. So we go around the country. I mean, we've been to universities in Okayama, in Fukuoka, in Okinawa, in Niigata, Toyama, Tokushima. So we really make an effort to travel around the country. And this is very interesting because out of these visits, sometimes really unexpected results come forward. For instance, we were at the University of Toyama, where there were a number of researchers who were dealing with advanced materials, which is also a real priority area for the EU. And then we did a follow-up seminar with them and some Italian researchers at the Osaka Expo in, obviously, Osaka. And as a result, they're now teaming up to do some joint research together. So that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. And so this is something that we considered quite meaningful. Now, the other thing that we're trying to do is to talk to Japan-based researchers who actually have already benefited from working together with European researchers under Horizon Europe funding. And because we consider them as sort of multipliers in the sense that they can explain to their colleagues what are the pros and cons of working together with Europeans under Horizon Europe, because it's true, it's the program and its application process is not for the faint of heart, but it's the outcome is usually so beneficial that we would like them to also explain to their colleagues what it has meant for their careers. So that's also a group of interlocutors that we focus on quite a bit. Now, obviously, Horizon Europe is one of the biggest funding programs in the world, so we reach out to our counterparts in the funding agencies. But something that we have started to pay more attention to are the European Researchers Associations. So there's a number of member states who actually gather their researchers into groups. So you have the Italian and the Spanish and the French researchers associations, and they have a very good feeling about how difficult it sometimes is for European researchers here, or how wonderful it is to study here. And therefore, they really have their finger on the pulse, and this is why we want to reach out to them as much as possible. And one way of doing so is by allowing the European Research Associations to use our facilities here in Europa House at the EU delegation so that we can do events together. So I think that you can see we go throughout the entire research community so that we have a good understanding of what's happening. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Yes, indeed. Your hospitality at the European House is also precious for Europe South Japan, as you have supported several other events for which we are always
With
grateful. Thank you
pleasure.
so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also have very fond memories of four joint visits to universities, Niigata University, for example, and
Yeah.
I recall Okayama and Hiroshima and some others. And we hope that, we'll continue along those lines in the coming months, especially that Japan has just concluded the negotiations about associating to Horizon Europe. And
Exactly.
I'm thinking maybe if we can combine two questions. What are the most important resources available to scientists and researchers in Japan interested in advancing their careers in Europe? You've mentioned Horizon Europe, of course. What kind of programs are involved within that? I know there are three pillars, so maybe if you can say a few words about the three pillars, and also what kind of new platforms have been developed to advance these knowledge networks. You might like to promote your LinkedIn account, maybe?
Absolutely. No, very, very true. So maybe let me start with the latter part on the platforms. I think one of the first things I try to do is to bring together alumni of MSCA postdoctoral fellowships, because it's very difficult for us to know exactly who is still here and also even what their names are, because under data protection legislation, it's not so easy for us to actually immediately get access to everyone around here. So we set up an organization for alumni. So it's early days yet to see what kind of activities will come out of this. But I think that is really something useful, so that we have direct contacts with those who have benefited from Horizon Europe funding and who are based in the country. So that's one thing. The second thing is LinkedIn, as you mentioned. We were thinking a little bit, what is the best social media channel to reach out to academics here in Japan? It's not such a easy question, because LinkedIn is not so popular in Japan, to be honest. But at the same time, it's the tool for the academic community, in particular those who want to benefit from Horizon Europe funding. Of course, at the end of the day, they will have to be able to communicate and work in English. So we thought that at the end of the day, instead of going for other social media channels, we opted for LinkedIn. And so we started to disseminate information about our events, about webinars, about your events that you are helping us a lot to advertise the various possibilities on Horizon Europe. And then I think at the when was it exactly? After the summer, we published a funding guide where you, if you're based in Japan, you can find all the opportunities for funding if you want to move to Europe. And the other way around, what if you're based in Europe, but you want to do research in Japan? What are your options? And we simply put them all together in a fairly easy to use guide, and we put that on our LinkedIn page, and that has really led to a much larger following of our posts. So that is very good. And then I put up the press release that the negotiations have been concluded on association of Japan to Horizon Europe. And this also immediately became one of the most viewed posts that we've put out there. So I think that has been actually useful in the end. I have to say most of them are European researchers instead of researchers with Japanese nationality, but still we're reaching out to those as well. Now, and then you come to the three pillars, and I actually want to highlight a little bit the third pillar. So for those who are not so familiar with Horizon Europe, Association of Japan to Horizon Europe is only meant for something which we call Pillar 2. Maybe that means nothing to the listener, but it's basically research that is, we put research proposals out there that are aligned with our policy objectives. So it's not just blue sky thinking, it's not just basic research or curiosity-driven research. It has to be aligned with our policy objectives. So that's pillar 2. In pillar 3, it's really much more about the question, if Europe is so good at delivering good science, why can we not turn this into innovation or into new businesses or innovative solutions to a lot of the societal problems that we face? So that's a completely different way of thinking. And for that, a new institution has been set up, which is called the European Innovation Council. And they came to Japan in October, and they might well come again this year, we hope. And it's very important because they bring small companies which are just starting up, which are using a lot of the science results that come out of Horizon Europe and then try to turn this into businesses. And we have them meet with their Japanese counterparts. And through this, we hope something beautiful, of course, will come out of that. And I think this is new to Japan too. So if you're talking about new platforms, I think this is one to really watch in the next coming years.
Thank you. And let me just say that you've mentioned the Marie Skłodowska-Curie Alumni Association.
Yes.
In connection with that, let me just also mention Pillar 1, maybe, in 2 words. So MSCA and the European Research Council, the ERC grants, belong to Pillar 1. And while those are unchanged with this current association agreement, they're also a very good base for Japanese researchers to get a stronghold in Europe and do research with their colleagues on their chosen topics through that. So those of you who are in the early stages on your careers, I would encourage you to apply for MSCA grants, and especially in postdoctoral fellowships. Those of you who are bureaucrats have the staff exchanges available. And there's also the doctoral networks for those of you who are still pursuing PhD studies. And in case you're a more established researcher, maybe the ERC grant is for you. So there are several options to choose from. And I would like to ask the final question along those lines. What would you recommend? What would be your advice to a young person in the early stages of their career? What kind of education path, what kind of job option selection should they go for if they would like to be involved in science diplomacy, science community, or just simply work along these lines in any capacity?
Okay, that's a tricky question to conclude with. So let me slightly rephrase the question. What if you are young and you're keen to get involved into science, whether it be social sciences or more STEM sciences? I think the most important thing is that if there is something that you have an interest in, then you should trust that a little bit, and then you should nurture it and feed it a little bit, and just follow your own interest, and don't worry too much about peaking or having great results or already at early stage. I think this is not the way to go. I I've always believed in steady progress, not giving up, and then slowly, ultimately, if you want to end up being a science counselor, it's never too late to become one, as you can see from my own career. So that would be my fatherly advice. And yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, very much. Thank you so much. Thank you. I would like to express our gratitude, the Euroccess community's gratitude for your time today and for the valuable advice and information. And I would like to ask our attendees to tune in to upcoming webinars, attend our events, follow us on SNS, and welcome you in upcoming webinars as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judith.